everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'll be doing a review of the new film from Nic Cage called Pig. Before going any further into my discussion on this film, make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video goes live on the channel, and also every time a new live stream goes live on the channel as well. All right, so the movie Pig. It's a story about a man and his pig. Pretty much is a story about a man and his pig, and that man, of course, is Nic Cage, who many of us already know from classic films such as Con Air, amongst many others. And in this movie, I will say this much: one of my favorite aspects of the movie is the performance by Nic Cage. It's one of the more quiet performances. It's probably the role that you will see Nic Cage speaking the least amount in, which is kind of amazing because I really feel like Nic Cage has become synonymous with giving some of the best line delivery in any actor's career. And so to have him in this movie not really say a whole lot of anything, it's actually a very different side of Nic Cage, and also really just goes to show you that Nic Cage is a very talented actor. He actually is a very great dramatic actor, dramatic character. And it's just so funny, though, how his whole persona, or the way that which we perceive him as a person, has always just been this over-the-top, crazy, hilarious guy. But he does actually have some pretty good acting chops, and I'm sure that anyone who's been following his career for a long time knows that he does indeed have some pretty good acting chops. So the movie Pig itself actually does feature a real-life pig, and so it follows the story of Nic Cage, who is a truffle forager. And what's interesting to me, and kind of like this dark, comedic persona of the movie, I don't know if dark is necessarily the right word for it, but essentially it goes into the underworld of truffle foragers, to the point where you're talking to and seeing other truffle foragers, and you're hearing about the prices, and you're hearing about trying to get into the business. It's almost like it's a drug business, like a drug industry, but it's over truffles. It's over truffles that are featured in these very high-price restaurants. And I just thought that was a very interesting take on a movie and on a story, because it's a movie and a story that we've never really seen before. Yeah, we've never seen a take on the truffle forager industry, or about the the way in which people can turn in each other, and it's like a cutthroat business. Basically, I never realized that truffle foragery was very much like the drug industry. It just was very interesting to see it be played out in this way. And I really want to go too much more into any plot details, because I do think that it goes very quickly into spoilers, and I don't want to spoil this movie for anyone that actually does want to go and see it. So I'll just talk about some of the more objective elements of this movie. The movie is directed by Michael Sarnowski, and I don't really know a whole lot about him as far as a filmmaker is concerned. It looks like this is his directorial debut, according to Wikipedia, which, hey, that's a pretty strong directorial debut, I will say. So not only did he direct it, he also wrote it, and also he was a part of the writing of the story for this movie as well. Nic Cage was actually one of the producers on the movie, and this film does star, of course, Nic Cage, also Alex Wolff and Adam Arkin, so people who I had never really seen a whole lot in other movies before, because I say Adam Arkin doesn't look too familiar to me. Alex Wolff, I want to say he may have been in some other films that I have seen. Is he someone that was in Old? He was in Old. Okay, he played the older Trent in Old. I thought he looked a little bit familiar. He was Spencer Gilpin in Jumanji: The Next Level, and in the first Jumanji film, Welcome to the Jungle. So you might recognize him as well if you've seen those movies beforehand. And I thought that the acting, for the most part, was just very, very solid. I mean, even all the supporting characters, there's just one guy who Nic Cage's character goes to at one point, who is running this underground fighting ring. It's almost like Fight Club. It was really interesting how it was like, wait a minute, is this where we're going to talk about the development of Fight Club or something? And essentially it's like you set the clock for a minute, and it's about how long can you stay conscious with someone punching you and beating you up? And I was like, okay, this is very odd and very weird to see this happen, especially when you find out a little bit more about the history of Nic Cage's character. It's like, how would that character ever have been involved in an industry like this? How would someone with that kind of a job occupation ever be featured and ever find themselves drawn to this underground world that is also somehow connected to truffle foragery? Again, it's just an amazing thing to see all of the different elements and layers that this movie does in all of these different ways. So I would say the acting absolutely is fantastic. The supporting acting is pretty great too. And I do actually really like a lot of elements of the story, because the more you think about the movie, the more you're like, this is such an incredibly insane concept, and yet in a lot of ways it works. In a lot of ways it does a good job. It pulls at the heartstrings a lot. You really care about the characters in the movie. You care about their backstories. You get to know just enough about them to care about them. And there's character development, which is a very rare thing in modern day Hollywood and modern day filmmaking. So it's very refreshing to see all of that stuff happen here. And you also really get some really good camera work as well, for the most part. Now, I will say this much. One of the biggest cons of this movie is probably the cinematography. And it was interesting because in the cinematography of the movie, you had some really well-framed shots, but the issue is that there were a lot of also random handheld shaky cam shots. Now, it made a lot of sense for me to see that throughout the movie in the scenes when he's walking through the forest, because you're like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. He's walking through the forest. He's trying to find the truffles. Okay, I can buy the whole shaky cam stuff. But then there's a couple of scenes where it's clearly a camera on a tripod and it's a very stable shot. But then also throughout the rest of the movie, you have these random sequences where it's just a bunch of shaky cam. And it almost felt like you had someone who was fresh out of college, who had gone to film school, who did the cinematography for this movie, who thought, oh, I learned all these really cool techniques. Let me go ahead and use these techniques, but I also want to be modern. And the modern way of making films is using shaky cam, which again does not make any sense to me. And so it ends up taking any framing, any good framing that I could have talked a little bit more about. It just takes it and just throws it under the bus because it gets destroyed by the entire shakiness of the camera. And in many cases, it was incredibly distracting. So it's one of those things where the cinematography, as far as the framing is concerned, I thought for the most part was good, but then the actual work itself, the actual camera work, and this is obviously a part of what the cinematographer would want for the movie. Sometimes on lower budget films, the cinematographer is also the camera operator. On other ones, the cinematographer is the one that, basically frames all the shots, tells the camera operator exactly what he wants the shot to look like and to do. And then the camera operator follows those instructions. And so it really comes down to that person at the end of the day. And yeah, this guy, Patrick Scola, I just was not very impressed by the work that he was doing in this movie. And I'm trying to see if this guy has actually done anything else. He's known for, let's see, Pig. He's known for Monsters and Men. Okay, I haven't heard of many of these, so it looks like he's done a lot of short videos, short films, so this might actually even be one of the biggest budget films that he has ever done at this point. So again, this is a very... When you talk about indie films and low budget movies, this movie is absolutely like the quintessential style and variation of it. You have a first-time director who, again, it's interesting that a first-time director is able to get someone like Nic Cage to not only produce the movie, but then also star in the movie. But then you also then have... Again, I think the direction also was pretty solid, but then for cinematography, they get this guy, Patrick Scola, who I don't really think has done a whole lot. And it really shows in this movie because it really, I think, can be distracting. When cinematography becomes a character unto itself, and that character happens to be a villain, that is not a good thing. Your cinematography should never be a villain in a movie. It should help to add to the story. It should help to... to build on the story. It's kind of like with other of these objective elements. For instance, the movie Whiplash. If you see the movie Whiplash, you know that the editing of that movie is a character in and of itself because all of the cuts go in line with the music that's in the background. And so you feel all of these different emotions that are being brought about because of the editing and music being very much connected together to the point where they in themselves become a character. This movie, you see the same thing happen with the cinematography, but it's in the negative because that should never result in these objective elements as characters being villainous. Should not be in a way of distracting away from the performance. And that brings up another issue, which is that the lighting in a lot of these shots, and this goes back to cinematography, was also really bad in some of these night sequences where you just couldn't see anything that was going on. And you have Nic Cage on screen giving these, what seems to be, I really can't say for sure, a brilliant performance. And then every time I'm trying to look and see exactly what kind of emotion he's conveying and try to appreciate the performance, I'm like, I can't see a darn thing because the lighting is just so bad. So that is, I think, the biggest downfall to this movie because the story is definitely very weird and bizarre. But if the cinematography was not nearly as bad, especially as far as, not just the framing, but the actual, because the framing, from what I could tell, seemed like it was competent, but then the adding of shaky cam, and it was one of those things too where some people say, well, maybe the shaky cam is there to try and add to the drama and is trying to, do something extra. But when you actually look at the film and you pay attention to it, you're like, no, this doesn't make any sense, because if the entire film was shaky cam, okay, maybe you can make an argument, though I think that's a terrible argument to make for any movie whatsoever. But then you add on top of that there are sequences that have clearly a camera on a tripod, and you're like, okay, this doesn't have really any rhyme or reason, and it just seems more artistic. It's like they had someone who was competent, who was making like a linear movie, taking care of the plot, taking care of the direction, but then the cinematographer was like, oh, I'm going to do an art house type movie. And it's like, no, you need to have them all working together. And ultimately that comes down to the director as well, because it's the directorship. And the director is the one who can tell the cinematographer, hey, I don't think that's going to work, or hey, I think you're using too much shaky cam, or, hey, we need to work with someone else if the visions don't line up. And it was, again, a very sad thing to see in this movie, because otherwise I liked it. I liked the movie a lot. Again, the performances are great. The cinematography, or rather the writing, I think, is pretty good. The score to this movie also is very good. It adds to the level. There's a great sequence at the end as well, where there is a shot of Nicolas Cage, which you can't see his performance in, but you can hear the music, and it just swells up, and it's just beautiful, and it really adds, I think, another level to the story. And it's just so sad that this movie kind of gets ruined in a lot of ways by the cinematography. But overall, I would say if you're looking to see a really strong Nicolas Cage performance, this is a really good movie to watch. You're not going to get the crazy over-the-top performances that you're typically used to with Nicolas Cage, so if that's what you're looking for, this is not going to be the movie for you. If you don't like slow burns or indie-type feel movies, this is probably not going to be good for you. And also, if you tend not to do well with a lot of shaky cam in movies, this is also not going to be a movie for you either, because it's just, again, so sad to see that kind of level of just incompetency on display when it comes to cinematography. And you all know, like, the two things that I focus on a lot are cinematography and visual effects. Luckily, there are not a whole lot of visual effects. There is a real-life pig in this movie, and that made me so happy. When I saw that real-life pig, I was like, this is awesome. Thank you for not using CGI to create a pig, and instead had a trained pig and doing some great sequences with with Nicolas Cage. So if you want to watch the movie, I would say watch it for the story, but just be ready for that cinematography to bother. If I had to give this film a grade, I'm gonna give this film a B-. And that's just how bad the cinematography is, to be perfectly honest, because this is a movie that could very well be a B+, A- level film based on story and performance, but because of that cinematography, it just distracts so much and really, I think, makes the film difficult to enjoy. But anyway, have you seen Pig? What are your thoughts? Do you agree with my B- score? Would you give it a higher or lower grade? Let me know your grade in the comments below. And also, if you want to be shouted out like the people who are about to be shouted out at the end of this video, check out the links in the description of the video to find out ways that you can support the channel, and also ways that you can, by supporting the channel, you can get shouted out. You can get access to giveaways. I've mentioned this in the video at the very end. I'm doing a bunch of Steelbook giveaways. I just got in some copies of Dread on 4K Steelbook. I also have some copies of Snatch on 4K Steelbook. I have tons of stuff coming in this month for giveaways, and you'll find out more in the video at the very end. But anyway, I hope that you all enjoyed this review. And also, for anyone that is a Locals or other Keep It the Bifrost level person, hopefully you also enjoy the extra bonus mini review. You got my instant reaction to this movie, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like the video, smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification turned on. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my August Locals, Patreon, and Subscribe Star members, starting off with my Locals crew: Cat's App, The Real It, D Sharp, Biffer the Hobbit, Robert Barnes, and Goblin Squatch. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Locals. And now on to my Patreon members: Andrew Hoyle, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dion, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father. Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Lance, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Allen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And lastly, to my Subscribe Star peeps, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for supporting me on Subscribestar, and to everyone for supporting me on these platforms. Also, a shout out to all of my YouTube members. You get shout out at the end of every single live stream. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video, please check out my locals Patreon Subscribe Star. And you can go ahead and find those links in the top link of this description. You can find it's called the Willow link, and it'll have a list to literally all of the social media platforms and all the different ways that you can support the channel. If you join at the $1 level, you can actually get your name shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream. $5 level gives you that, plus you get access to exclusive giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I've got tons of 4K steelbooks to give away this month, including for Top Gun. I also have A Quiet Place Part 2. I have Snatch on 4K, the John Wick trilogy on 4K, and also I have a Sicario 4K disc as well, and a bunch of others that are going to be coming in this month too. So if you want to have access to any of those types of exclusive giveaways, join at the Army of Asgard level. At the $10 level, the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, including instant reactions when I go to see movies. I do quick little filmings of myself and talk about the films that I have seen and my instant reactions to that. You also get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger once or twice a month, and you get to also ask us any question that you want. We put a Q&A post up, and you get to ask us whatever it is that you want to ask. So again, if that sounds cool to you, Keeper of the Bifrost level. And lastly, there is the Chosen of Valhalla level, where you get all that stuff. Plus, in your first month as a Chosen of Valhalla member, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, ship it anywhere in the world, and also you get to once a month be featured on the OMB Reviews channel, and you get to talk with me. We usually chill out for 3 to 4 hours, and I ask everyone what they've been watching, what they want to talk about, what they want to promote, and it's always a really good time. And so if that sounds interesting to you, please consider joining. That is going to be on Subscribestar and on Patreon only, as Locals is just the Keeper of the Bifrost level. But anyway, thank you all very much for your time, for your support, and for listening to this shout-out video. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.